Hello. Um, for this episode, I want to be talking about recycling. So I've kind of alluded to recycling a lot in the structural videos that we made, um, and now I want to explain what I mean by that. There is a scene in four, four, I think, of my scripts that revolves around a tree stump in a back garden that is impossible to remove and that has sparked philosophical discussions and has sparked romance and has sparked exciting thriller moments with an axe and has sparked fights and has sparked so many different things. um and I keep recycling that same scene in so many different ways and in so many different scripts. And sometimes I go back to, a moment earlier in the life of the tree when it's just a tree being planted, or that scene and that situation and that location, I suppose, comes back a million times over. And I can do that because all of those scripts haven't been optioned and or sold or haven't been made into anything. Now, as soon as one of them gets made or sold or option, I'm gonna have to go back to all of the others and change that scene because obviously, as soon as it gets used, it's then used up. But that is exactly my point. As long as your scripts are just that, they're just scripts and spec scripts and drafts floating around, you can recycle scenes that are really, really good. You can use them, or you can use them in different scenarios, or if you have a script where the rest of the script turned out to not be worth it, but there's one scene in there that's like really, really good, take that scene, put it in a different script. You don't have to lose that scene forever just because the rest of the script didn't work out properly. So that's what I mean by recycling. And I think there's two different, maybe three, but two for now, different ways in which we can recycle. So the first way is what I just alluded to is, okay, the rest of the story didn't work out properly, but there's this one amazing scene or this one amazing character that I just don't want to lose, just because their story didn't work out properly. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to take that character, or I'm going to take that scene, or I'm going to take that situation and put it into a new work that I'm working on right now. Right? So you can just recycle bits of failed. I don't like that word failed because because of recycling, they're never failed. Nothing is ever a failed moment. And you can put them into new scenarios and reuse them and turn them into something that actually works. You don't necessarily have to do that just within a story. You can use a story for a whole, or you can use a moment from a story for a whole different story. I've reused a story that was originally written for a little a beautiful little romance set here in Ireland, and I've reused a dialogue moment to set it into a historical drama that took place 1,000 years ago. So, you don't have to be bound to anything, as long as the stories are still yours, as long as they are not yet produced, optioned, or purchased. You can recycle as much as you like, steal from yourself as much as you like. Now, the second big category that I think comes in is world building. So I love building my own kind of cinematic universe. So that's, look, I use big words, but that it's not as big as it sounds. But I love making little connections. I love thinking, oh, you know what, that character from that hostage action that takes place in Guatemala, maybe, she spends a little bit of time in Ireland at the start of her story. And maybe she could be living, she's the neighbor of the character that I write about in my beautiful little romance drama. So, those secret little connections help enormously with the world building, and they also help me by recycling scenarios and by recycling in a more subtle way. I'm not plucking dialogue from one thing, putting it into another thing. I rather, recycle the scenery, recycle the feeling, recycle the world building that I use for my script. So I have a lot of my stories are set. Obviously, a lot of my stories are set here in Ireland, and so I always tend to imagine this beautiful cottage with blue windows, always blue windows, set out in the west of Ireland with gorse blooming all around. And that's the setting for, like, I think at this point, 4 or 5 scripts. Partially that are partially set there, or that at some point involve that place. It's a magical place. It doesn't really exist. I've never found that magical place. I live in a beautiful magical place here in Ireland, but I don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be a real place, but I recycle that place for so many different stories, and some of them are action, some of them are thrillers, some of them are romances, some of them are straight up hard-hitting dramas. So recycling and stealing from yourself is such a fun way of understanding the world that you're building. And even if it's connections that aren't really necessarily real, but if you imagine them, that's so much fun. So I try to imagine that all of my characters know each other, and if they all got in a room together, they'd be best friends. All of the characters from all of my different projects. And so that is what I mean by recycling. You don't have to necessarily always create, if you want to, always create a fresh new world. And sometimes I do want to. Sometimes I come in and it's a fresh new world that I've never touched before. But sometimes I come in and I want to already know the people in this world, and I want to already know the scenery that they're going to be, prancing around in. So recycling is hugely important, and recycling is also means that you're not necessarily always starting from a blank page, and you're not necessarily always starting from scratch. And it also means that if you decide that a script just isn't working, never ever ever just delete it or throw it away. The scenes that do work from that project, they can always be reused, and they can always be made into something more, and recycled and upcycled into something bigger. Or even, especially with feature scripts that might have a more kind of dialogue driven setting, some of the dialogue, some of the smaller scenes could be turned into shorts, or could be turned into shorter projects. So that is also something that recycling can do for you. So there's never an end to a life cycle for a project, I don't think. Even if a project doesn't work out, or even if a project doesn't ever get made, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was not worthwhile writing it or creating it, because A, you learn something, B, all those parts can be Frankensteined into something much, much better and much greater. And so that's my thought on recycling and how important it is. And that's my favorite thing to do. And I realize now that I do it probably more than I should, but it just makes my work that much easier. And I steal whole monologues from myself. Like, there's a monologue about the mountains in India in like 3 of my scripts at this point. And I love that monologue so much. And if ever one of those gets made, I'm going to be sad to see it go, because I can't reuse it then. So yeah, don't be shy to steal from yourself. Don't be shy to recycle your own work and make it into something more. And that's my thought on recycling. Thank you.